Okay, so my name's John Reed, and I've been asked to say a few things about my past life and current life in the music business. I guess, yes, I grew up in a place called Shoreham by Sea on the south coast, and I guess my first memories of really being turned on to music was I got given a Beatles album and a Stones album when I was 12 or 13 by some friends of my parents, and this would have been in the late 70s. And I was just immediately smitten by the whole 60s look. And so I like new music, but I was just like, this is amazing. And I think that was the turning point for me. And then around that time, there was what they called a mod revival. And to me, that tallied with a fascination with 60s music was the mod fashion. And there was a band called The Jam, led by Paul Weller, who came along, who became our band. And what was amazing about that was that us people who grew up with that generation, led us to so much music, like the vista of Black America from the past, jazz, soul, R&B, funk, whatever. And also all the 60s British bands as well, but not just the obvious ones, the more obscure ones. And so that just became a passion and a hobby, going to see live bands, in and around Brighton. And fast forward, went to university in West London at Brunel, but I was doing a science degree, and I guess, got really involved in putting on bands at the venue there. It was called, what do they call it? The Kingdom Rooms, I think, or something. And was involved in DJing and actually quite a few bands that I really admired at the time, like Orange Juice, Stone Roses, people like that. And did a couple of interviews as well. And then when I came to leave college in '89, I kind of thought, I don't really want to get a proper job. And then a friend of mine who was looking for a proper job said, that magazine that you read, that no one else reads, Record Collector, they've got a job advertised down the road in West Ealing, South Ealing. And I looked at it and went, and it sounds arrogant, I don't mean it to be, I looked at it and went, that's me. Because it was the right age, they wanted a graduate. So I applied for it, thinking I'll do that for a while, and got the job. And that was, what was that? 99, 98, 99? No, sorry, 89, 1989. And I joined as a research assistant or something, and then became research editor, something like that. And then around that time we started work on this rare record price guide, which really was just a great way of doing this encyclopedia of information about old records, which at that time there wasn't really a compendium that listed all these old records with their catalogue numbers and all that. And I loved all that. So that kind of, most of the 90s took care of, of interviewing lots of bands. I was really into indie music and contemporary bands, so interviewing lots of groups. Like, for example, In Spiral Carpets were the first band I interviewed, and I was 24. Fast forward to when I'm 48, I'm out of sequence here, but we moved to Manchester in 2011, and then I'm 48, and I signed the In Spiral Carpets, twice the age I was when I met them, to Cherry Red, and I'm sitting in a studio in South Manchester while they're recording what became their last album, which was prompted by me doing the deal with them. And it felt like a little circle of life, really. Yeah, so I guess this takes us to 1996, 7. I've written this book about Paul Weller that did quite well, and then read this article, I think around that time. And then this label called Sequel that was run by a chap called Bob Fisher, lovely guy, back in the 70s who worked at Motown. And he'd been given this label Sequel at Castle to do these kind of bespoke reissues, but he'd left, and then he was replaced by someone else, and he'd left. And so this label was lying dormant, and they talked about it for a while, this job, and for other reasons I won't bore you with, eventually I got the job and started in July 98, I think. I remember being in the pub in Ealing with some old college friends, and I think one of them said to me, how's your week been? I went, not bad. We found out that we're going to be starting a family because we were doing IVF, we just found out that my partner was pregnant with our son, and I got this job. So it was one of those momentous weeks. I think I had a few beers that night. And Yeah, so I started at Castle down in Chessington at the time, running a sequel, and I loved it. I mean, I was quite green then, but the whole idea of working back catalogue, it was that they had the Pie catalogue, Curtain Records, which was Curtis Mayfield, Immediate Records, you know, Andrew Oldham's label. Really good stuff that I liked myself anyway. And it was just great fun. We reissued lots of vinyl, but we did CDs, we did compilations, dug really deep into the annals of the Pie catalogue, found different themes. And I just found it like addictive, really. And I guess to this day, that's still the buzz that I get from what we do. So that took us from 98 to 2006. And then around that time, I think that Castle had been bought by Sanctuary, had evolved. Sanctuary were obviously at a point when they were going to sell. I wasn't very happy there anyway, and I left around that time, 2006, summer 2006. And I would say there was quite a lot of rock and roll antics. I was probably doing some stuff I shouldn't have been. So I was maybe sort of nursing my wounds a bit, and came out of that thinking, oh, well, the last thing I want to do is work for a record company again. And our kids were quite small, and I ended up being kind of a house husband for a while, doing bits and pieces, record dealing, CD dealing, writing a bit of stuff here and there, wrote another book about madness. And but I started doing a bit of freelance work with this company called Cherry Red, and I knew Adam Velasco, the MD, from my days at Castle, at Sanctuary. And the original prompt was that a friend of mine who lived just down the road from me in Hove, as it was then, we wanted to run a reggae label, or reggae reissue label, because I'd looked after Trojan Records at Sanctuary, amongst other things, met all these amazing Jamaican guys and girls, whatever. And this guy, John, was an expert on this stuff. So we went to see Cherry Red about doing a reggae label, and it didn't happen. But because I was dealing in CDs, picking them up cheap, selling them, I could see that some titles, well, if we reissued that, there's obviously interest on the collector's market, as though the two definitely inform each other. And yeah, why don't we do that? So about 2008, I think, maybe 2009, started doing stuff, odd releases for Cherry Red, and it just grew from there. 2010, came on board as a consultant to work behind the scenes more in the business side of it. Licensing, a thing called synchronization, which is placing music in TV and film, updating their licensing catalogue. And that's where that knowledge of old records and music definitely came to the fore. It was an asset. So yeah, from that point on, we moved to Manchester in 2011. I was going to go back to college, and I went back to college to study to be a lawyer and starting my legal studies. But Cherry Red just kept calling with more stuff, more projects, more roles. 2012, I think, they started a label with, or 2013, with Alan McGee called 359, which didn't really get off the ground, but for about a year I was really busy with that. We started doing these various artist compilations, which definitely, I mean, out of the blocks, they were doing really well, and we've done about 150, 200 now. And so there was lots of different aspects. And then in 2014, as a bit of a joke, I emailed the MD saying, because I was doing a lot of stuff myself, because I was working from home. And as I say, we've moved to Manchester by then. Facebook had come along, and I was doing a lot of marketing just myself, promoting things on social media, or just Facebook, really. In those days, you really could, if you put the work in, you could get a result. Yeah. The algorithms allowed those things to spread naturally. So I kind of had a marketing sort of idea for Cherry Red. And I said to, like I say, the MD, half tongue-in-cheek, I've got the perfect job description. I think this is what Cherry Red need, and I've got the perfect candidate. It's me. And bizarrely, he took it seriously. So all these things, most of my career, most of the things I've done have happened as a happy accident, no doubt. And that was one. So 2014, autumn 2014, I started full time. So since then I've been doing 2 days from home, 3 in London. That was 11 years ago, right? And that's been unquestionably the most creative and rewarding period of my career. Just because we're a smaller company. When I was within Sanctuary, which was a much bigger company, my role was a bit more specific. This is kind of, you have to be a jack of all trades. So it's doing deals to buy business, it's coming up with ideas to make money from your catalogue, it's being involved in licensing out, licensing in, signing older artists but with newer albums. So it kind of runs the gamut of everything. You're continually trying to think of different ways to be creative and or make money for the company. So yeah, it's I didn't think I'd still be in the music business coming up to my 60th birthday next year, but I am, and I still enjoy it. I mean, it continues to be challenging. There's no doubt that sales of CDs and vinyl are slowly but surely ebbing away. But a lot of the business at Jerry Red isn't about that. It's about streaming revenue, it's about licensing, it's about placing, like I say, tracks in film and TV. And even though those things sound drier and less creative, there's still, the people who are good at it have still got that passion, that kind of, people talk about an earworm track, or you hear something and you see a piece of music in a film, or you hear a track you've never heard before. It doesn't have to be new, it could be from the 60s or any time, and you're caught by it. So that, I think the music industry is almost divided between what someone once referred to me, oh, you'd like that person, they're a music person. And I remember thinking when I first joined a record company, isn't everyone a music person? Well, no, of course they're not. There are people who are good at admin or royalties or management or sales, not necessarily music obsessives, but I'm definitely in that category. And it's great fun, yeah, absolutely. So the market for old music, if you can call it that, I mean, I guess it always starts with the people who are interested in it, consuming it. So if you think of people you know, some of them will listen to music on the radio. They're not bothered, so they might like Radio 2, or they might have found a digital station or whatever, right? And so if they're into jazz, they'll find a niche jazz show, and that might be enough for them. Oh yeah, I listen to so and so on, or whatever, right? Then you've got people that no, I've got a really nice record collection or CD collection, or I stream it all on Spotify, or So each person depends on their taste, depends on their lifestyle, and that's what's changed. So I don't think people's interest in music has diminished. I think now what's fascinating is that in the old days, certainly, or in the past, I noticed a difference with our kids, for example. Things were quite tribal. I don't mean that you were necessarily a punk or this or that, but I think for example, if you were really into jazz, you probably really didn't like pop, and you defined yourself by not liking it. You stood against some types of music, and there was no harm in that. There was no antagonism or animosity, but it was quite tribal, and you were part of like a jazz sort of coterie of people. Jazz fans congregated with each other. And what I think you get now with younger people, or those who've got a curiosity about the past, is that it's all just there. It's all in front of you, and that's a different way of experiencing it. So I remember being in the car with my daughter, my son's into music, but my daughter's really into music. And this is around the time we did this pub rock compilation. And pub rock in London sort of started with this group called Eggs Over Easy, who were an American group who ended up playing at the Tally Ho in Kentish Town, is that right? And they just sort of washed up here, and people went, actually, this is nice, great roots music, why not? So I'm in the car, and we'd just been working on this compilation, and then my daughter said, I want to play you something. And I went, okay. And I put it on, I thought, what's this? I don't know it. She went, oh, it's some band called Eggs Over Easy. And I nearly crashed the car. I'm like, no one's heard of Eggs Over Easy, right? She went, oh, some, a guy, a friend of mine at university, he came across them. And you think that's the different thing. But also, they're not doing it because they're hardened, ardent, like obsessives I really like pub rock. They just come across it, they quite like it, they've shared it with friends. And then they go and listen to something else, entirely unrelated. So I think the way that music is consumed and enjoyed has changed. I think that from a Cherry Red point of view, people are still buying the box sets and the vinyl reissues. And of course, it becomes ever more difficult. There's a lot of fatigue in the market. Every time you do something really well, you can't redo it really well again. It's kind of been done, so you've got to find something else, right? And I think we do a very good job at Cherry Red kind of improvising and thinking of that. But I think the market for consuming music has just become ever more fragmented and three-dimensional, and a challenge for any rights holder, I guess, which is what the music business is about making money, is how do we do that? How do you protect what you have the rights to, and how can you maximize the revenue from it? And I think on a good day, you can be really creative and be something that nourishes or values the music, but also makes money. And a lot of the time, of course, that means then accounting to the artists who need to be paid. So it's, it's an interesting business. I think the music industry itself kind of got caught a few times when they were too inward facing. I think it hasn't, as a body, looked into the future cleverly enough. And they allowed, for example, Apple stroke iTunes to dominate when they should have created their own version of that. And the same with Spotify, when they could have created their own, and they had opportunities to do so. And I think that sometimes that's the criticism of the industry, that it doesn't look at what the people want. They're referring to each other instead of, not the great unwashed, the people out there who are buying music and consuming music. So I think it's an interesting, who knows, as AI, of course, is the buzz term at the moment. There's some fascinating, if tongue-in-cheek kind of mashups of groups. You get, oh my God, there's the jam track by what appears to be a soul band. And of course, it's done on AI. That's great fun, right? But that needs to be separate from, in a way, the legitimate stuff. So if AI can't replace real music. So, that there is a lot of serious stuff going on behind the scenes to make sure those copyrights are protected and all the rest of it, yeah. In terms of accessibility, of course, everything, millions and millions of tracks at our fingertips. But I'm kind of reminded of that adage of if you walk into an ice cream parlour and there's like 3 flavours, banana, or 4, strawberry, vanilla, banana and chocolate. Great, anyone can handle 4 choices. If you walk into an American ice cream parlour and there's like 300, at some point it ceases to be a choice that is meaningful because there's too much. And I remember when they first, jukeboxes in pubs, when they first had sort of access to the internet for music, where it was all stored in a server, they had these, I don't know if they still do, but in pubs you could basically play any track in a pub. And so after a couple of I wonder if we've got this. Unless it's curated, unless there's some perspective, it becomes meaningless. Because if it's an infinite amount of stuff, how do you find it? Because where do you start? It's too much. So I think on the one hand, everything's there, but then there's still a need for you to be introduced to something. Either you hear it in a film or a TV show, or on TikTok, or someone recommends it, or a friend shares it, or whatever, right? Or for example, you might have a kind of, what was that, was it Last FM in the old days, where they would have play an REM track, say, and then it recommends stuff that sounds like REM. So you can kind of be led to music that's similar to the music you're listening to, right? And the algorithms can do that. So there's still a process of, in a way, things being curated, and there's a structure to it. So the music just being there to listen to, I don't know. I mean, they reckon that there's some mad statistic, isn't there, that over half the music on Spotify has never been listened to. So it just being there doesn't make it accessible, in the sense that if no one's finding it, it's not accessible, right? In the same ways, if you had a record shop, and a good record shop, you walk in and you're led to certain, they've got different sections, you're led, there may be some records on the wall, the guy behind the counter might have a conversation with you and hopefully not be rude and condescending, and actually says, what are you into? Oh, well, I like Miles Davis. Oh, have you checked out John Coltrane? Or whatever, right? So the point is, that's what a record shop can do on a good day. If you opened the door of a record shop and it was the size of Wembley Stadium, with records stacked 30 feet high, all right, some of us would love that, right? Because we're addicts. But most people go, I'm not doing that. It's too much. So that's where accessibility, sometimes less is more, which is why actually what happens is a lot of people are just listening to the same tracks over and over again on streaming services and not necessarily being curious and dipping into other stuff. For example, the owner of Cherry Red introduced, or helped to introduce, a thing called National Album Day. And the concept was that everyone's just listening to tracks. It's so disposable. But the album really coincided with the dawn of sort of serious rock music, if you like, around mid to late 60s. And that means something. The idea that you would go home or put a record on, if it's a CD, you just press play once. If it's a vinyl, you're going to turn it over. But that the record and the order of the tracks and the way it's presented is as a whole. It's a concept, if you like. And so these things have value. It's not just, no, I like that track, next, you know. So I think the future's interesting. I think current music's got its own challenges. My passion is for past music and how that can stay valid and how you can find different outlets for it. But equally, I think everywhere you move, there's music. And every program you switch on, there's music in the background. So it's not going to die. It's going to evolve in terms of how it's digested, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, so just to wrap up, my current role is Director of Catalogue at Cherry Red Records. If you're curious about the products we release and what we do, check out our website, www.cherryred.co.uk. You'll find lots of CDs and records on there. And also, of course, we have YouTube channels and Spotify channels and what have you. So yeah, mostly music from the past, but also we have contemporary albums as well. So yeah, check out Cherry Red Records when you get a chance.